MapleWings Flight 373A is already climbing out of Toronto.
Unfortunately, ice is forming on our plane. Let's try to get out of here.
But one switch started it all.
I never heard repeated banging from the engines.
The engines begin backfiring and surging.
Fuel engine fill. What? Both engines are out. Shoot!
I was thinking I might die today.
Flight 373A is about to crash somewhere over Ontario. How could that happen?
Brace! Brace!
January 20th. It's a cold, cloudy morning in Toronto, Canada.
Boarding pass? Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Just 2 rows in front. Enjoy your flight, William.
Thank you.
Boarding pass?
65 passengers board MapleWings Flight 373A. It's a 111 bound for Calgary, Alberta. The plane is packed. Brian Carey and his wife are traveling to Calgary for wedding.
This was my 4th time being on a plane as a passenger. Me and my wife booked a trip to Calgary for our wedding so we can start a family.
Ryan Sanchez is a 23-year-old off-duty pilot for MapleWings. He's headed to Calgary to spend a couple of days with his mum.
Well, to start off, I was traveling to Calgary to see my mom. She'd invited me over for my birthday, which is in a couple of days.
The main reason I boarded this flight, it was simply just to visit my grandparents and also a bit of work.
I was traveling to Calgary to visit some relatives, then head back to Mexico.
There are 4 crew members on board Flight 373A.
She's old.
Captain Fred Jacquet and First Officer Robert Lyon are both very experienced on the type. They know this aircraft for more than 20 years. Fred is the most experienced. At 50, he's been with the airline for 23 years and has accumulated 17,740 flight hours in his career, with 4,591 on the 111.
We had to fly to Calgary from Toronto with 3 stopovers, so it might have taken 5 to 6 hours.
Robert also knows his routine. At 39, he's been with the airline for 12 years. Robert accumulated 9,230 flight hours in his career, with 892 on the 111.
I just wanted to be done with this long shift and head home for the night, which was Calgary.
Ignition, sir. It's cloudy out here.
That doesn't make a difference on our flight.
It shouldn't.
The plane is a 22-year-old 111-400. There's another flight with a similar number to Flight 373A. A suffix is added to avoid confusion, thus why there's an A. The 111 is a British short-range jetliner produced by the British Aircraft Corporation.
I've flown that plane like more than I even remembered. She always flies well. The maintenance was always successful.
Because the jet is made for short routes, the flight will be making stopovers across Canada.
The 111 aircraft was a rare, medium-sized plane in Canada. Quebec Air had 6 and MapleWings had 4. By the time that the 90s came around, these rare aircraft were phased out.
MapleWings Flight 373A will stop briefly in Thunder Bay, Winnipeg, and Regina before it reaches its final destination of Calgary. The plane has enough fuel for the first leg of the trip. It will get more next stop. MapleWings was a low-cost Canadian airline that operated from 1966 until 2010. They're headquartered in Ontario, Canada.
Give me a sec. Thank you.
MapleWings only flew 5 aircrafts: the Boeing 737, 111, Fairchild F-27, Twin Otter, and the HS-748. The airline flies most of South Canada and the upper part of the United States. In June of 2010, the airline merged with Air Canada.
MapleWings was the airline I worked for, so I decided to take some time off and get on this flight to stay there for a week.
Maple 373 Alpha, runway 33, cleared for takeoff, winds calm.
Cleared for takeoff, Maple 373 Alpha.
Each stop took like about an hour or so.
V1.
It was one of those rather gloomy January days that Toronto does quite well. The sky was overcast, the conditions looked distinctly uninviting, but the weather itself wasn't especially challenging. For the crew operating that day, it was actually a very routine set of conditions.
Positive rate. Gears going up.
Maple 373 Alpha, contact departure 128.8, bye.
Toronto departure, Maple 373 Alpha, with you, maintaining 2100. Everything was routine like always. The weather was fine, but it was cold. The clouds that time were just everywhere.
I thought the temperature was above freezing, so I didn't turn on the anti-ice that early.
Flight 373A is finally climbing out of Toronto Pearson International Airport.
I remembered that it was mostly cloudy all day. It was, of course, cold.
As the plane climbs into the sky, it passes through a heavy cloud.
When we passed through that cloud, I thought it was going to be a normal and soft cloud, but then I saw ice on our visual ice detector rod. I just ignore it since nothing was happening that time.
It started raining whenever we went through those clouds. No storm, just water.
That's some heavy clouds we got. There's nothing on our radar, so we should be good.
Flight 373A is cruising at 21,000 feet above the Canadian countryside.
We've reached cruising altitude. You may move around if you like. If there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable, please let the Maple girls in the front know, and welcome aboard!
Whatever makes the job fun.
Yeah.
Hello. Could I just get a bag of Lay's, please, and thank you? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
I asked Fred and Robert if they wanted something to eat or drink. Sometimes they need a refill.
Anything to drink, guys?
No thanks.
Fred?
I'm fine.
Okay.
The plane goes through another cloud, but it's way bigger than before.
While we were at our cruising altitude, about a couple minutes after the in-flight service, we went through some clouds.
This is strange.
The radar is not providing accurate information on what's ahead, but the crew has a bigger problem as they pass through.
I started to see ice, so it was best to let Fred know what we're really in.
There's ice. Do you see it? Yeah.
Ice is one of aviation's oldest hazards. Even relatively small accumulations can disrupt airflow, reduce performance, and in some circumstances affect engine operation.
Supercooled water droplets can freeze upon impact with a metal airframe. The icing fundamentally changes the weight and aerodynamic profile of the aircraft, which can eventually lead to a stall.
Oh shoot. We can't stay in this environment any longer. Unfortunately, ice is forming on our plane. Let's try to get out of here.
Oh, that cloud. I didn't know we'd be in it for a couple minutes. That's when we noticed the ice is rapidly accreting on our plane. I knew I had to get out of here. If we don't, our plane would be covered in so much ice that we could crash.
Let's climb out of here.
The first thing we did is we started a climb, because the higher you are, the more time you have after your plane becomes broken.
Trying to push through the top in an icing layer is almost always the preferred tactical move before a total power loss occurs. Basically, try to get as much altitude as you can and all that.
Ice affects the airflow of our plane. What should we do? I'm gonna turn on the anti-ice. Go ahead.
The system uses hot compressed air taken from the engines themselves. That air is routed to critical areas where ice is most likely to form, like the leading edge of the wings, tailplane, and engines, helping to keep those surfaces above freezing.
I guess my decision on switching the anti-ice on was my biggest mistake in my life.
Although conditions justified the use of engine anti-ice, the crew did not activate the system immediately. Instead, they delayed selecting it for a short period. From the flight deck's perspective, there was nothing especially remarkable about that decision. Crews frequently exercise judgment about precisely when to configure aircraft systems as conditions develop.
Suddenly, there's a big problem. A flameout occurred on the engines.
As soon as Robert switched on the NI system, things started to worsen. I heard like boom boom, like metal clanging from the back.
You hear that? Yeah. Seems like a compressor stall. Good grief.
When the pilots eventually turn on the anti-ice system, they're simply carrying out a routine action that perhaps should have been completed a little earlier.
I never heard repeated banging from the engines. That was the first time I ever heard as a flight attendant, so I got scared.
Shortly thereafter, the engines began to make banging noises, and then they went quiet. At that moment, I was thinking I might die today.
Oh my gosh, this can't be happening again.
The effect is immediate and dramatic. The engines begin backfiring and surging so severely that the aircraft feels as though it has suddenly encountered enormous resistance. Airspeed begins to decay, climb performance disappears, and the crew are confronted with a cascade of warnings.
It's obvious something was absolutely wrong here, so I had to notify these passengers.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to a problem, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We'll be passing through the cabin to pick up any remaining service items.
I was cleaning up the leftovers from the passengers.
I think that was the most unusual sound I heard from the engines. It barely stopped sounding like a plane, like it was just giving up.
Fuel engine failure.
What?
Both engines are out.
Shoot! Let's descend!
I looked into the manual book so I can know exactly what we should do in this situation. And it worked out well.
Close and throttles back to idle. And don't restart the engines.
Got it.
Fred then reduces the power to idle.
Call ATC.
We always need to contact ATC if we're in an emergency. It's to keep us safe.
Center! Mayday! 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 Dual engine failure at flight level 210! Unable to proceed. Kilo, India, Sierra, Alpha, Papa. Maintaining heading 265.
Maple 373 Alpha Roger. Squawk 7700. Turn left heading 140.
For vectors back to Pearson, runway 24 right.
We're, enable, sir. Negative. We're in manual reversion. We have no electrical power. We can't dump fuel.
Maple 373 Alpha Roger reports souls on board.
69 souls on board. Full load for Calgary, Maple 373 Alpha.
Just keep on gliding.
At that point, we're just basically a glider, but time is running out as we are descending.
All stations.
Toronto Center, airport is closed due to emergency in progress. Maintain radio silenced unless commanded.
Arrival flights, stand by for diversion vector.
Toronto Center, Air Canada 829 Heavy. We're leveling at flight level 2.
Toronto Center, Canadian 44 Heavy. Leveling at flight level 250, heading to...
Traffic in the area has to divert back because of an ongoing emergency. The path of Flight 373A needs to stay clear of traffic.
It's completely unavailable. Emergency vehicles are currently going towards Caledon crash coordinates. You're diverted to Ottawa International. Turn left heading 060. Climb and maintain flight.
Power's out.
At this stage, The flight deck workload increases enormously. The pilots are hearing alarms, monitoring rapidly changing engine indications, and trying to determine whether the engines can be recovered before they fail completely.
The power goes out. Now it's even more urgent.
Maple 373 Alpha, Toronto Center, do you copy?
Communication with the plane is now impossible until the power returns.
The whole cabin became quiet. The engines were damn out. I would say the heater may have quit also, so we started to get kind of cold. I prayed that I hope we all can make it. That's when me and my wife both hold hands.
Radar contact lost. Be advised.
Restart the APU. That's what I'm doing.
The aircraft is equipped with an auxiliary power unit, or APU. It's a small gas turbine engine carried primarily to provide electrical power and pneumatic bleed air while the aircraft is on the ground. Under normal circumstances, it's not something the crew would expect to rely upon in flight, but with both main engines failing, it suddenly becomes one of the most important systems on the aircraft.
The APU, or the Auxiliary Power Unit, is a backup power generator. It's the main source that provides electricity to the plane, but it will take minutes to power up.
The crew immediately attempt to start the APU. The problem is that it isn't designed to come online instantaneously. Like any gas turbine, it has to accelerate through its start sequence before it can begin supplying useful power. Ordinarily, 2 minutes isn't a particularly long time. In an aircraft that's just lost both engines, however, 2 minutes can feel like an eternity.
The powerless 40-ton glider is falling at roughly 2,500 feet per minute.
It's going to take a while to restart.
It may have took like 4 or 5 minutes to get through that big old cloud that just iced our plane significantly, so we really need to land somewhere.
Plane finally punches out from the cloud after a couple minutes.
Finally, we're out of here.
The power out. The plane's quiet. Clearly something was wrong. So I went to talk with Fred and Robert. What's really going on?
Is everything okay?
Yeah, the power should be back on in a bit.
The windshield was just barely covered with ice, which was concerning.
The windshield?
It's ice.
Okay. We will be prepared for whatever happens.
We'll update you guys on what's going on.
Okay.
By now, the situation is becoming increasingly stark. With both engines producing little or no meaningful thrust, the 111 is losing altitude continuously. The crew can calculate their glide range, and the numbers are not encouraging. Toronto's airports are simply too far away. The aircraft does not have the altitude required to reach a suitable runway.
No electricity for a while now. Nothing's working.
After 2 minutes without electricity, the APU finally starts. They now have power, but they don't have engines.
We're back online.
Good. But we're gonna have to do an emergency landing. We can't continue to Thunder Bay like this.
That's the plan.
Maple 373 Alpha, confirm altitude.
Passing flight level 20. We are flying a completely clean aircraft with no flaps and spoilers.
Our windows are still iced.
Our windshield was just almost covered with ice, so the only solution was to turn on the windshield heat and all that, which basically melts the ice.
Ready for the checklist? Let's start. Thrust lever, idle. Fuel selector, shut. LP lever, close. APU control lever, on. APU start button, depress.
This checklist that the pilots have to use that does explicitly require the use of the APU. So if they run through those and find out neither their engines nor APU works, they'll have to start thinking about where to put the plane down based on their current location.
Tell them if there's any airports within reach.
Will do, sir. Are there any airports that's close to our position?
Maple 373 Alpha.
Pearson is too far for your glide profile,
But you have the Brampton Flying Club at
directly south from your position, roughly 13 nautical
miles from you. Runway 15 is paved 3,500-foot strip.
As soon as Center said Brampton was the closest, which was behind us, I decided to go for Brampton.
We'll try for Brampton. Toronto is way too far for us to reach.
That's a good choice.
Brampton-Caledon Airport is 24 kilometers behind them. It's a general aviation airport with short runways that are not suitable for a 111.
Before we do anything, I need to update everyone on board. This is your captain speaking. Sorry for the unpleasant experience, but it's very
Likely that we are in an emergency situation because of a dual engine failure and all that, so please stay calm as we will
try to bring this plane down safely in a while. Make sure you always follow the instructions from our flight
attendants and don't panic.
We started distributing out pillows, just so the passengers can have extra protection if the plane crashes.
For preparation, we ask you to stay in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. And please make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in the upright and locked position. We will be reviewing the emergency procedure in a moment. Thank you.
It felt quite long before we hit the ground.
Now the crew is going to attempt their approach for Brampton.
The flight was just completely quiet. Some people were talking. All I can remember is that I was eating my protein bar that I got earlier in the flight.
We're now trying to turn left, 160, now heading for Brampton.
We're configuring for the approach now.
Fred Jacquet, an old and wise man, may have known the formalities of landing an aircraft on any surface, but what he was facing right now was his biggest test yet. His decisions cannot be dwelled on as he is gliding on a 40-ton airliner with families on board.
This thing is a boat.
The plane was just hard to control. Everything became slow, the controls and all of that. I guess that failure messed things up.
While turning, drag starts to increase.
Easy now, easy.
I know. I gotta focus.
Be careful not to stall. Stop turning! Stop turning! We're gonna stall!
Got it.
Whew, that could have been worse.
Turning the plane was just... the ailerons were non-functional, which we eventually gave up turning back to Brampton because our plane wasn't cooperating. Otherwise, we could risk a stall.
The crew failed to do a 180-degree turn back to Toronto or Brampton. It could be catastrophic if they kept turning.
We're already losing attitude.
Maple 373
Alpha, Toronto Center, you're descending rapidly. Are you able to head back to Brampton?
Center, 373 Alpha. We're unable to turn. Drag killed our glide profile.
We don't have enough altitude to reach Brampton.
We're aborting the airport attempt. Are there any other places we could touch down safely?
Maple 373 Alpha, roger. Turn right heading
250. You're flying above
rural area of Creekbank. 8 nautical miles ahead of you are some fields and open farmland at Spruce Green.
flat farmlands with no built-up structures.
Winds are calm. Maybe they're the best areas you can land.
Emergency equipment has been notified.
We have no choice now. We need to put the plane down somewhere safe already.
Air traffic controllers see no other airports rather than Brampton. They recommend a farmer's field in Spruce Green.
No airports within reach. Brampton was our missed opportunity, so our best bet is to put it down a field somewhere.
Fields it is.
Once that becomes clear, the objective changes completely. The question is no longer how to reach a runway, it's how to put the aeroplane down under control and with the greatest possible chance of survival.
Just keep going straight. Don't turn.
It's best to keep the plane straight and keeping the wings level, because that will use less energy. While turning, on the other hand, wastes a lot of energy and attitude, which can be a bad choice.
From now, the flight only has 8 minutes or so, until it hits the ground.
We started looking out for each field. Some were big and small. It was hard to pick each one because we don't know if the terrain down there could be bumpy or smooth or all sorts. So we were kind of picky.
See a big field over there. Should we land there?
Probably not spacious. Keep going.
If you say so.
Other than fields, I also saw roads, which we could land there like their small runway.
How about the highways?
The roads? They're narrow and small.
The roads down there, they would probably have traffic, but it sometimes may be a perfect to land on a road, but it's not recommended.
If we found a road with no traffic, we can land there smoothly.
Yeah, but you don't know if the highway has cars or obstacles on it.
Landing on a rural road instead of a field may be risky. 19 years ago, a 111 facing a dual-engine failure was forced to land on a highway in West Germany. The crash landing killed 22 people on board.
A highway landing should be treated as an absolute last resort. As crazy as it may sound to land on a highway, sometimes it's the only stretch of pavement long enough to give you a chance of survival. Even then, you're dealing with cars, signs, bridges, and power lines that were never meant to share the road with an airliner.
You're right. Now we'll try to figure out.
If you go for the highway, you're gonna kill people on the ground.
Okay, I know. I'll try to pick a field.
Okay, make it count.
Picking a field, most of them were small. Some were big, which we already overfly them. Picking a close field while we're like 3 kilometers in the air, that requires a massive descent rate. So our best thing was to just stretch the glide, pick each field we can find that's closest, and touch down safely.
My 4 bars never felt heavier knowing I'd have to land either in a muddy field or on a rural highway.
We're falling at 2,400 feet per minute.
It later got to the point that we lost more attitude in a couple of minutes. We didn't pick a perfect field to land at yet. Some of them were small, not smooth, so we really spent some time in the air before we start our touchdown.
Have you picked a field?
Not yet.
With altitude disappearing by the second, every potential landing site had to be judged in an instant. Choosing the wrong one could turn a survivable accident into a fatal one.
Have you found a good one yet?
It's empty down there. Most of the fields are the same.
We could just go for any fields and land without a scratch, possibly, because we're flying over a rural area of nothingness. However, we need to find the biggest field we can possibly reach so that we have enough space to slow down to a perfect stop.
Don't worry. We still have enough time to pick a field ourselves.
If we lost enough altitude, we need to pick one ASAP. If we lose enough altitude, we could stall out.
As the plane descends more and more, the crew knows they're running out of time. They need to land immediately.
As we were losing altitude, we both had argued on which fields to land, else we would go for the road. Eventually, we determined that we're putting it down a field. That big field, it had a lot of space. It could be enough to slow our plane down, but it will work definitely.
Robert, have you figured out a place to land safely?
I am at my wit's end, trying to help you pick a field other than spruce greens.
For spruce greens if all else fails. You think we can reach spruce greens?
We have some glide distance left, so it's possible.
I hope we can make it, Robert.
They finally determine their spot to touchdown.
That one, over there. That's spruce greens?
Yes, sir.
Looking ahead, the pilots identify open farmland near Conestoga Lake. A field is obviously not designed for jet aircraft operations, but it offers something they desperately need: space.
The flat farmland is much larger and longer. It's more than 2 kilometers long, but it looks safer than a highway.
We have the field in sight. We're landing
there now. The APU is keeping our hydraulic barely online.
Maple 373 Alpha, understood. The entire Wellington
Fire Department has been notified.
Emergency vehicles are shifting from Brampton to track your visual descent now.
That's the field we're going for, yes?
Yeah, we're heading for that field right now. It's what Center recommended.
With no engines to bail them out, the crew had exactly one chance to get it right. As the altitude continued to fall, the field beneath them quickly became their only realistic option.
That's big enough of a field for you.
They need to act fast to get there.
Lyanna, prepare the cabin.
Right now?
Yes.
Okay. Bend down and hold your knees!
During the descent, having flight attendants unbuckled and going through the cabin will seriously endanger their safety, even during training. Instead, they're belted into their jump seat, repeatedly telling you to brace.
Brace! Heads down! Brace! 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 Brace!
A couple moments before touchdown, flight attendants told us to brace. So I did that. And in that moment, I was really wondering whether or not I'd be able to see my mom or my dad afterwards. Didn't know if I would survive or not.
Put the gear down and lower them flaps now.
lowering the landing gear, flaps, spoilers, etc., would happen much slower than normal because of the damaged hydraulics. Without hydraulic pressure, there's an emergency system that allows a gravity drop of the landing gear. When activated, gravity will pull the landing gear down and deploy it. They can't raise the landing gear again, and the gear doors remain open.
Maple 373 Alpha.
Radar contact is dropping
out.
I will lower the flaps more once we get closer to the ground. Okay. 600 feet.
The crew needs to adjust their approach for the field, or else it can go wrong any moment.
The crew now face the prospect of carrying out a forced landing in terrain that has never been surveyed, never been prepared, and whose surface conditions are largely unknown.
That huge blank field, it seemed big enough for our plane to slow down, so I guaranteed we're going to make it.
You've got this, Fred. So do you.
We were so concentrated on landing the plane that we kind of stopped talking. The main goal was to land safely without crashing.
Flaps 40. Steady.
I held this brace position for like 2 minutes. My wife kept worrying, so we both prayed.
Without engines, there's also no reverse thrust to slow the plane down. They have to rely on spoilers and speed brakes when it touches down.
I sat in the front and Liana sat in the back. Then I braced myself to prepare for a hard landing. Then I got very scared.
I felt like I had everything for the field approach, and there was no time to lose anymore. It's now the time we do it.
I'm a smooth in the land.
Fred then pitches the plane slightly up, hoping to soften the crash landing.
I saw the ground get closer and closer when the plane was going down. I already knew we were going to crash, so I tightened my seatbelt and hope we will survive.
Witnesses on the ground can clearly see Flight 373A approaching the ground. It's an unusual occurrence to them.
Spoilers on. 200 feet. Here we go.
As we got closer to that large field, I realized there's also some trees. Like, there's not a lot.
This is what we're going for. It's flat and smooth. Correct. Center, Maple 373 Alpha. We're landing on the field now.
The message Fred said to the tower, it wasn't received because the radar already dropped out.
Bless them. I didn't want to die. I knew the front of the plane is the most unsafe in a crash. I kept calming myself down, hoping I can live.
Come on.
We screamed everyone to brace on the final seconds. This time, mostly, everyone immediately did the crash position.
Brace for impact! Bend down! Hold your knees!
Anytime now.
I never thought I should die. I always think where to put the plane down, and this was the spot.
Land, boy.
Brace! Brace!
The plane touches down on a muddy field.
The landing was rough. We kind of landed smoothly, but the ground was bumpy.
The ride after that touchdown, it got really bumpy. Like, sometimes it was smooth and bumpy at the same time.
We had the speed brakes deployed, the spoilers. I don't know if we're going to slow down perfectly because our plane is kind of broken.
Hang on tight!
On the field, we saw that there were some trees, and God, I hope we don't hit them.
During the rollout, the plane begins to sink into the muddy soil.
The plane, slowed down quickly. We didn't need to put a lot of pressure. The terrain helped slow our plane down.
"17 minutes after gliding, Flight 373A comes to a final stop on the ground.
Robert, I think we did it!
Everyone applauded after we touched down, so I thought everyone was okay, we're all good.
He sure did! That was superb!
Oh my God! I couldn't believe we made it! From no engines to landing on a field!
We didn't hit anything.
The controller does not know what has become of Flight 373A. An aircraft in the area relays the news.
Centre, Cessna Charlie Foxtrot Tango Whiskey Romeo. We're a Cessna 152 at 2,000 feet flying over Spruce Greens. We have visual on the emergency aircraft that just crash landed.
Roger. Can you tell me where they landed?
West of Highway 12.6.5 kilometres away and south from Drayton. They slid around half a kilometre. Looks like they're all okay down there.
Roger. Emergency crew have their location and diverting to their location now. Maintain 2,000 feet. Advise us if you notice any changes on the ground. Guys, they actually made it!
Excellent work!
Good job!
To honor Fred and Robert's work on bringing the plane down safely, I wanted to thank them before I started evacuating people. Leanna was the first to start it anyways.
Everyone, please stay seated until we tell you to evacuate! Thank you, guys.
You bet. Aubrey, evacuate the cabin.
We will. Also, good job.
Thank you. We're not done yet. We gotta turn everything off first.
What began as a routine flight has ended with a successful forced landing, a result that only minutes earlier must have seemed highly unlikely.
Stand by, folks. Just give us a minute, and we're out of here in no time.
We need to do a checklist for evacuating before we get everyone off. This includes if there aren't any hazards and we're safe.
Parking brake. Sit. Throttles. Closed. Fuel levers. Closed.
I looked out. It seemed safe outside. No fire, no smoke, so we started opening the doors. I deployed the slides.
And I deployed the air stairs at the front and back so we can either slide down or take the steps down.
Everyone, please evacuate to the nearest exit quickly.
The evacuation was very quick. Everyone, stood up at once. We kept moving to the front of the plane till we went off the slides.
Initiate the evacuation.
They're already doing it. In fact, let's go!
We needed to get everyone off the plane as quick as possible, so we had to do what we're trained for.
And during the evacuation, the line was extremely long, and I was starting to pray and also think, I'm not gonna make it out of this. I'm gonna be dead. My grandparents are gonna miss me.
Please leave your belongings behind. Remove your shoes and cross your arms across your chest if you're going for the slide.
It felt like a miracle. Thank God. I didn't expect us to all die in a tube. I just kept my hopes, and we kept on living.
Do we cut everyone out?
No.
Well, come on!
The whole evacuation took less than a minute.
Once I got out the plane, we were in the middle of nowhere. Don't even know how help is going to arrive. The ground was muddy. It was just an open field of nothingness.
Because of the surrounding environment at the site is mostly muddy during the winter, rescue efforts are rough. They would have to get there by off-road vehicles on ground. They arrive within minutes to attend the survivors.
You okay?
The police will be keeping any sightseekers away while the rescue operations are ongoing. They have to block concession roads and farm lanes to prevent people from converging on the scene.
Halt! This road is closed! Go back!
We checked on everyone. They're all okay. No major injuries, so good job to the two of you.
It's obvious that every single person on board survived the landing. Not a single one was killed.
It was just a miracle. They all listened to our commands and everyone survived without any injuries.
The landing. I already know no one's dying from that. That's a pat in the back for me.
News reporters are quick to arrive on scene to break the miracle to the world. Because there was no fire and the aircraft is largely intact, passengers can now go back inside the plane to retrieve their luggage and return back.
They told us that the aircraft is perfectly fine, so we went back in to grab our luggage and head to the buses that drives to the airport.
After an accident like this, pilots should always contact a union hotline and get the appropriate legal advice, make sure they're properly represented, and all that legal stuff.
You guys need to appreciate our hard work on getting the plane down safely.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. And our stewardesses that actually care about you.
That's right.
The first investigators arrive just an hour later. The rest will arrive soon. They will get to work on the evidence. Investigators begin photographing key elements of the plane. It'll provide more clues later on.
This investigation was actually my first time getting dispatched to a crash site. Going there was rough. We hitched a ride on a quad to get there quickly. It was very unusual seeing a plane just sitting on a field.
Wynne Reynolds is a senior investigator. He will be leading the case.
You're going there, hopefully, with the idea that you can find out what had happened, why it happened, and how do you prevent it from happening again in the future. Hopefully it does.
Investigators have little than a month before they become the TSB. They would have to rush to lock in key pieces of evidence before the transition in March. The two black boxes that store flight data and the cockpit conversations are recovered immediately. They seem to be in perfect conditions.
Make sure the black boxes get to the headquarters.
The longer the perfectly intact plane stays on the field, the more it'll sink into the ground due to the soil.
She can't be sitting here any longer. How are we going to retrieve the plane?
Because the plane landed in a muddy field. I already knew we can't fly this plane out, and we will have to find a way to get equipment out there.
With the crew being unavailable, the investigators will have to rely on the physical evidence for the time being.
We walked along the path that 373A slighted, and we found two metal pieces, which was a part of the plane.
Take a picture of that.
The landing gear doors were sheared off.
Those doors were the first one to hit the ground.
There's another one over there. Let's check it out.
Those two are the only things that separated. The entire plane is just in one piece.
Investigators now know the landing gear doors were open upon impact.
A lot of the systems on the plane, the electrical system, the hydraulic system, the fuel system, all of these systems are looked at, both in terms of what is their history leading up to the accident and what remnants are remaining at the crash site that can be examined.
Investigators suggest getting a fuel sample sent off to the labs to confirm a hunch they have about fuel contamination.
We initially had a reason to suspect possible fuel contamination within the engines, as there was a 111 involved in an accident in West Germany back in 1971.
All of this for the report to come back clean to the investigators. No contamination of fuel played a role.
If the fuel was contaminated, the accident would probably happen far earlier, like dual engine failure or immediately after takeoff earlier.
But ultimately, we were able to conclude fuel contamination had absolutely no factor in the accident at all.
So, if it's not fuel, then something else killed the engines.
Investigators then turned to the plane's maintenance log, hoping to unravel more.
Then we found out that the APU on this plane failed a week prior to the accident and was scheduled to be pulled from service to have it fixed.
The maintenance done on the plane may play a role in the accident. They interview who done the work on the APU.
I just need to know what you did with the APU.
All right. The maintenance worker at Toronto that we interviewed testified that the APU was repaired weeks earlier, so it had in no way contributed to the accident either.
Interview the crew.
Thanks. That helps. It's not the APU, guys.
So, what could it be?
Weeks into the investigation, they overhear that the government is taking over the investigation, launching a broader inquiry.
The Ontario government was looking for an experienced trial judge to lead the inquiry into the disaster, and preferably one with an aviation background. One of my colleagues, the Honorable Virgil Moshansky, was off spearheading the inquiry into the Air Ontario accident that happened a little under a year ago, so I was called upon to lead the inquiry into the MapleWings accident.
Investigators can now finally interview the people that were involved in the incident.
We were quite eager to interview the crew members, as they were the ones that saw and heard a lot of stuff, on top of flying the plane towards a successful emergency landing in the field. While we applaud them for their ability to land a stricken 111 in a field, we had to make sure they didn't do anything that put that plane in jeopardy.
That's what I
Come along.
Booming.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know it's been a rough last couple days for you both, but I'm going to ask you both to describe the climb out from Toronto to the point of the emergency landing. I want your individual recollections. We're not here to compare statements right now, but just to capture what you remember. I'm going to start with you, sir. Take a seat, will you?
That I remembered everything we done, from takeoff to, landing. So investigators were just feeling anticipated.
So, what can you tell me about the departure and climb out from Toronto?
It was as normal of a departure anyone could ask for. Mild weather, but we were aware of the risk of icing and were monitoring our ice detector during climb.
Did anything seem abnormal? Anything out of the ordinary?
Nothing unusual. We had some ice accumulation. Nothing too terrible.
Did you ever turn on your anti-ice equipment upon the first sign of ice?
I believe we had them on, if I remember correctly. The SOP dictated we had them on anytime we were in icing conditions, but I didn't believe it was accumulating fast enough to have them on right away. You know what I mean?
So, who was pilot flying for this flight?
Me? I elected to have the role of pilot flying. My first officer took the role of pilot monitoring.
Just to back up a little bit, when did you turn the anti-ice on?
We selected anti-ice on once we had like a few inches of ice on our detector. Couldn't have been any more than 2 inches at the most.
And then what happened after you turned it on?
It was like all hell broke loose. We had severe loss of thrust, ratings were all over the place, you name it. We consulted with the checklist and declared an emergency.
Did you ever associate the engine issues directly with you turning the anti-ice on?
No, never really thought of that. We were busy trying to maintain control and figuring out where to put it down.
Alright, I'm gonna pivot over to your first officer for a bit, alright?
As investigators interview Robert to confirm what Fred saw, Robert has the same experiences as Fred, until...
Do you believe that this might have something to do with the anti-ice?
I don't think so. I would like to say it happened afterwards, but we were dealing with all these warnings and all that. I can't see the two being linked.
The same thing as Fred. Every word he spoke out. I do recall that from what I remember.
Just to be clear, both of you recall the engines just shutting down on you shortly after anti-ice activation, but neither of you believe the two are linked at this time?
Yes, that's correct.
Alright, we may come back to both of you individually later on once we've reviewed engine data, weather information, and maintenance records. For now, we're building a timeline of events, alright?
The fact the crew reported a catastrophic dual engine failure was so astounding, we could not believe what we were hearing. We interviewed some of the passengers just to verify what the crew said, because it was so improbable that we weren't sure if it was a fluke or the crew misremembering.
Investigators interviewed some survivors, who all tell a common story.
Would you guys mind telling us what you remember?
The catastrophic failure of the engines that coincide with the crew's recollection of the anti-ice system being turned on.
The passengers seated in the last 10 or so rows of the plane, all of them consistently seemed to witness the same deal. What appeared to be ice or a similar material coming off the wings or cowling and coming back, possibly ingested into the engines. That seemed to be a common pattern that emerged, so we knew we had to check out the engines.
Investigators now order for the engines to be removed and transported back to a warehouse for further examination. To get to the site easier, Bulldozers are used to make a stable path from the nearest road to the plane. And to protect the airline's reputation and image, workers painted over the logos to hide it from the media.
This is going to be a high-profile and potentially highly controversial investigation, and the only way the truth stands up is to have the hard evidence from the aircraft itself, and we put it in the lab located at the capital, Ottawa. Digging deeper into the engines, we found out these poor Rolls-Royce have been through the ringer. There was significant damage to the compressors and the core of the engine that was consistent with the fan blades being broken off and ingested deeper inside the engines.
The engines are damaged significantly from the debris. It's obvious they're in bad shape.
Is this all what's left?
The damaged SPAY engines, it was obvious that some pieces are missing. The big fragments that became small fragments after tearing themselves apart inside the engines, and the only way to recover those parts is to get out there and search along its path.
Investigators must find the missing parts, which now lie somewhere in farmlands. They use the flight data recorder to map the plane's journey and determine where the fragments may fall. After scouring through the fields along the plane's path, the team found dozens of small fragments, just only half of what's missing. Many are very badly damaged. The ice shedding violently destroyed the internals of the engines. But it was about time to clean up the mess. Retrieving the entire plane will be a painful process. They will have to find a way to get equipment out there.
The major problem here is the heavy recovery team, they can't fly it out of here. That plane's stuck on the mud. They can't leave it there either. So they have to disassemble the plane into separate pieces.
After the interior is cleared, crews can start dismantling the plane. It will take more than a while to complete. Then, when the disassembling is done, the cut sections will be loaded onto trucks to a recycling facility.
This 111-400 is an ancient plane. The fleet would have been retired, so it would be sent to a yard to be broken up. So this would be the end of the road for the 111.
Following the airline deregulation in 1988, Flight 373A happened 2 years into deregulation. Could that have played a role?
The airline deregulation in 1988, competitive pressures, and rapid expansion had compromised safety standards and airline management practices. Assess how Transport Canada failed to properly monitor airlines as they upgraded to more modern planes, all that kind of stuff.
We knew that our airline industry deregulated in 1988. So I can see a rookie crew doing that by error, but an experienced crew, like what 373A had, was probably complacency.
It's obvious that pilot error contributed to this accident, but there are many factors to unravel.
To see pilot error also played a factor to this, we thought we're on top of things and a curveball comes flying past us. It's like a punch to the gut.
During the investigation, the Transportation Safety Board of Canada was formed by an Act of Parliament to replace the Canadian Aviation Safety Board, or CASB, on mid-March.
Because of that, there was new people, like say, some of them either retired or new hires got brought in to join the investigation.
Because this incident happened in January and the CASB dissolves in March, the CASB would start the fieldwork, but the actual analysis and writing would be dumped onto the lap at a newly formed TSB.
Investigators consult the 111's manual to study its anti-ice system.
We also decided to check out whatever components left to salvage of the anti-ice systems from the plane.
Was the anti-ice working?
And conducted a multitude of tests.
To test the operability, they'd instead used compressed air, because the engines aren't even on the plane anymore.
And we were able to conclude that the anti-ice system was in perfect working order.
The anti-icing system was working, It's already clear that the plane was just in perfect conditions. Maybe weather might play a role.
When we interviewed the air traffic controllers to see what the weather was like, we learned that while it was cloudy and mild out, de-icing wasn't really required.
The controller that last handled Flight 373A testifies that airport procedures dictated de-icing when precipitation was present around that time. But there's another question. Why did the crew fly into a cloud with supercooled liquid droplets?
I think that I recall that the radar showed nothing. But what we actually saw outside were clouds, and then ice.
So airborne ice crystals aren't detectable on radar? Ice crystals could have gotten ingested and clogged up the engines?
The clouds were completely invisible to the old weather radar used. Because the droplets are microscopic, it lacks the size and mass needed to reflect the longer wavelengths of the radar.
We didn't have a whole lot of leads, so we had to turn to the cockpit voice recorder, which was a goldmine of information to listen to. We had the crew not turning on the anti-ice equipment at the earliest opportunity, and everything else in between, which is really concerning.
Okay, just to be clear, we won't have the first minute of the CVR, as that got overwritten. We won't have 2 minutes either, since the CVR wasn't recording at that time.
Anti-icing is set.
So far, so good. They mentioned anti-ice as required per the checklists.
Basically, the checklist mandates that stuff be on prior to departure into icing conditions.
Positive rate.
Gears going up.
Climb out seems all right. Nothing too out of the ordinary there.
There's ice. Do you see it?
Stop right there. They're clearly discussing ice building, yet we got ice building up on the captain's indicator and everywhere else. If anti-ice wasn't on already, should have been right from the get-go.
The crew mentioned about anti-ice, and they have done that checklist so many times they got complacent and forgot it was on. By the time they turn the engine anti-ice, it gets chaotic.
If the engines gave any audible feedback as to the ingestion of ice, it would have been compressor stalls, surging, and whatnot.
Listen to that. That's the sound of the engines just tearing themselves apart.
You hear that?
Yeah. Seems like a compressor stall. Good grief.
Gotta be ice sloughing off the wings and going straight into the engines. I'll tell ya.
Closing throttles back to idle. And don't restart the engines.
Got it. Imacall ATC.
When the plane's power gets cut, that means the CVR will stop recording until the power comes back on.
And this is where the CVR cuts out for approximately 2.5 minutes.
During that outage, we don't even know whatever the crew was doing that time since the CVR was cut along the power. But that missing 2-minute gap is where we wish we had the most available data.
We're back online.
Good. But we're gonna have to do an emergency landing.
We can't continue to Thunder Bay like this. That's the plan.
The good part is that the power's restored, but they don't got engines, and they have to find a way to land immediately.
Stop turning! Stop turning! We're gonna stall! Got it. Whew, that could have been worse.
We're all...
They're clearly boxed into a corner here. They're at roughly 17,000 feet. You might think they can turn back to Toronto, but that's easily 3,000 feet lost just turning around. No way they'd make it back. Can't make it to Kitchener, Brampton, or anywhere else.
No airports within reach.
Brampton was our missed opportunity, so our best bet is to put it down a field somewhere.
Fields it is.
They basically got no options. They literally got to land on a field, is what they got left.
Just keep going straight. Don't turn.
Gotta give them props. They're having a hell of a time flying her in that state.
I hope we can make it, Robert. That one, over there. That's spruce greens.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
They picked out that field just to the east of Conestoga Lake.
That landing spot is determined, and they're going for it now. Not knowing its actual conditions, whether it's bumpy, smooth, they just don't know that field. It's just big. It'll work.
Land 'em, boy.
Hang on tight!
And they're down.
Oh, Robert, I think we did it!
And that was a flight crew that made a series of mistakes, but ended up making the best of it.
Now that we knew that the anti-ice system was actually off instead on, we then had to look into specifically why the anti-ice system was off. We could not believe the pilots would make such an obvious yet fundamental mistake.
There's ice. Do you see it?
When ice was accreting fast enough that it was visible, the crew turned on the anti-ice. But why did the crew of Flight 373A didn't turn on the anti-ice from departure?
You hear that?
Investigators may think this has to come from previous training. They start digging into the airline.
This compelled us to start digging into the training manuals for MapleWings, and what we found was less than stellar. The manuals MapleWings provided to their pilots didn't give us much guidance, if any at all, on how flight crews would treat flight into icing conditions, which is scary in and of itself, especially since Canada regularly gets cold and wintry weather.
As Gwyn reviews the flight manuals from MapleWings, he's less than impressed. The manual is less of a manual, but more of a pamphlet.
With the lack of training in mind, we decided to call up other flight crews to see what they would do in the same scenario that the pilots of 373 found themselves in, and what we found was deeply concerning in of itself, in combination with the almost non-existent training.
So, what do you do if ice is accreting on your plane?
Investigators contacted other flight crews within MapleWings' roster, with all the responses being to wait until ice got to noticeable levels before turning on the anti-ice system.
You'd wait? You'd wait? You'd wait? How much ice?
Some pilots would even specify 5/8 of a centimeter up to 3 3/4 of a centimeter of ice to be specific.
Okay.
Other pilots would believe turning on anti-ice was a performance hit on the aircraft, being turned on only when absolutely necessary.
A lot of this aversion among the flight crews towards turning on the anti-ice system stemmed from when the airline started transitioning from prop-driven planes at some point in the 1960s. The airline predominantly had a fleet of turboprops for the longest time before they started jet service sometime in the mid-1970s. This included planes like the Fairchild F-27, the Hawker Siddeley 748, and the de Havilland Twin Otter. A lot of MapleWings pilots had extensive experience on those older planes, and they were concerned about the potential of ice bridging occurring when they used the de-icing boots on the aforementioned planes, and so one could deduce where this myth of waiting until ice got to noticeable levels was coming from. However, they ended up bringing this myth over to the newer jet-powered planes that MapleWings bought, even those that used heated leading edges instead of de-icing boots like the 111.
Ice has brought down many flights. It's not a new thing. On the 9th of January, 1997, a long-standing false belief at the time that flight crews should wait until ice built up to an observable level before turning on the wing anti-icing system led Comair Flight 3272 crashing.
Once it became apparent that there was this kind of potentially dangerous myth doing the rounds among flight crews about waiting until ice buildup was at noticeable levels before turning on anti-icing equipment within this low-cost carrier, this was a shock to the flying public when it made its way to the newspapers and tabloids that this airline, and potentially many others, were putting their customers at undue risk, and so there tended to be quite the demand for answers. And we also needed to call upon Transport Canada for answers too.
We decided to see if there was any angle by interviewing executives, managers, those that worked for the airline to see if they had a handle on the situation. They ended up telling us that training their pilots was certainly lackluster in some areas, perhaps even outdated in several areas.
Investigators may know why the crew turned on the anti-ice when ice was becoming present.
No.
The flight manual the crew used was outdated. If Robert and Fred had the latest flight manual, the whole accident could have been avoided.
They were actually working on distributing updated flight manuals to their flight crews leading up to the accident, but it kept being deferred for some time. So while some flight crews got it, others didn't. They basically had to make it up as they went along or consult with other pilots that did.
There are many endings the crew of Flight 373A had. The initial plan was to land on a highway, but that was already a bad idea. Landing on trees, however, would be catastrophic.
If you put the airliner down in an area with an abundance of wood and large obstacles, the plane would simply become the world's largest and most expensive tree trimmer.
And if the crew continue the 180-degree turn back to Toronto, they will lose 3,000 feet of altitude to glide. After that turn was done, it was possible to land at Brampton, but an overshoot was possible. If they overflew Brampton and instead go for Toronto, it's horrific. There were also possible choices that were way better. Instead of a 180, a 90-degree turn to Waterloo might be a possible chance to land at an airport, but that requires multiple turns which can eat up even more altitude. If they never turned and kept going straight, they would have more time in the air than what they had. The outcome would be the same as what actually happened on Flight 373A.
That's big enough of a field for you.
The crew's actions on Flight 373A are heroic in commercial aviation.
Right now?
Yes.
First Officer Robert was credited for his decisions made to the captain.
Land him, boy.
This crew flew until they stood still on the ground. They never gave up, not even an inch.
We came to the conclusion that this was preventable. But everything conspired against the pilots, because MapleWings management did not have an adequate safety culture. And you need to have an adequate safety culture from the top management down to the folks that are just punching the tickets.
After the TSB is done with the investigation, instead of going to a nice, beautiful final report that would be handed over to the judge's commission and inquiry.
Just 3 years after the miracle, the commission releases their final report in 1993.
When my inquiry report finally came out in 1993, our objective at the time was to determine what happened that day in Conestoga Lake and to understand why it happened. An aviation system is only as safe as its ability to identify and correct these kinds of assumptions before they contribute to an accident. We don't find someone to blame. We do this to find the lessons that prevent the next accident. That's the purpose of an accident investigation.
It lays blame on the airline for allowing a perilous practice to become normalized and for inconsistent implementation of updated training.
Good afternoon.
Transport Canada was responsible for not identifying and correcting those organizational outcomings through effective oversight.
Pilots are imperfect little creatures. Them not activating the anti-ice stuff at the first sign of ice is what started it all.
By 1992, the crew of Flight 373A received the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale Diploma for outstanding airmanship.
Really, the skills we learned, and we used this in a real event, that paid off. That was marvelous. The award exists, that we can always remember that day.
The crew of Flight 373A both continue flying for MapleWings. First Officer Robert Lyon stayed on the job for 19 years while Captain Fred Jacquet flew for 1 more year before retiring. His experience at Conestoga Lake shaped his whole career as an airman.
I didn't know that a routine day on the job could turn into something big like this. An accident, that everything was okay. It was just more than that. The people I had on board, they all got families, and
it would impact them if something like the plane crashes. That never happened. I am just glad it ended up as a miracle. I wish that what I learn now, I wish to have known that before. But the past is the past.